Hey everybody, how's it going? Good to see you all. My name is Ben Thomas. I'm one of our vertical leads over here at MarketScale. I help lead a lot of our AV and integrated technology verticals, and I am very excited to walk through some of the ways that I've used video content at a trade show to help really amplify my voice and the voices of our communities, but also walk through some of the ways that our clients and folks have been part of that as well. So there, it's a pretty open forum. So I've kind of got a PowerPoint and just some slides that we'll walk through, and I'll walk through some of those examples. But if you do have a question at any time, more than happy to kind of help answer it, because it's designed to be a really open forum for us. So I'll go ahead and dive in and start sharing that presentation. Can everybody give me a thumbs up if they see that? I believe you should, but let me know if you can. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and start at a high level, especially for folks who are using Studio and folks who really want to leverage the power of video content in the marketing side of things. We'll do so at a trade show. So trade show is one of the easiest ways to get everybody together, to get all your thought leaders together and all of your partners to create content. Ian knows this very well. A lot of the examples that I'll use today, Ian actually was supportive on the back end as well. So Ian, big shout out to you ahead of time. He's joining us today, but we'll go ahead and kick it off. So some of the things we'll talk about specifically are, what are some of the types of video content typically you see coming out of a trade show, and some of the ways that people are creating content. Secondly, really preparing in advance for success ahead of time. There are obviously ways to execute some of these at the trade show, but the more that you can prepare in advance, the better. We'll walk through some of those best practices. And then really focusing on two key areas of messaging. So one vertical would be creating company-specific content, and then the next would be creating thought leadership, which is a little bit more open-sourced, open forum. You're going to see lots of different people in there too, so we'll talk about that. And then the last one is I'll just kind of walk through some of the ways that I leveraged not only the Studio tool, but was able to leverage video content throughout my tenants at a show called Infocom, which is one of the biggest trade shows in professional AV and integrated technology. So we'll dive right in. I think, when you look at trade shows, it's almost the culmination of our physical communities, right? So many different folks from across the world, from different verticals, from different companies and organizations meet in one place. So we want to leverage those voices as best as we can to create video content with them, to help elevate their branding, to help elevate their partnerships, and to maximize the spend for a trade show. You'll hear a lot of folks a lot of times say we want to drive ROI for our trade shows. One of the best ways to do that is through video content. So here are some of the typical formats that you might see for video content from a trade show. These aren't exhaustive by any means, but typically on the live side of things, you'll see roundtables, live video podcasts, interview content, things like that. Folks doing live product announcements or product reveals, or even some more Instagram, TikTok style, open format where I'll pull my phone out and we'll do a walk around for booth and I'll answer questions in real time. So you can do a lot of that content live. And then on the pre-recorded side, things like booth tours or product-specific profiles where you can go really in depth ahead of time. And then when you think about kind of the soundbite side of the world, it's a little bit more company. You can have some company-specific content, partner content, thought leadership. Quick, really dynamic pieces of content that'll keep people engaged. And then things like daily overviews, show recaps, profiles of folks, things like that. Those are some of the ways that video content is leveraged. So with that, I want to start at the top. So I want to talk specifically about preparing and planning your show in advance. The first step to having any successful in any we'll call it marketing initiative is to define your clear objectives, your audience, and your goals. So one of the things that I like to point out about trade shows is that you have a lot of different audiences simultaneously. So you obviously have folks who are at the trade show. You've got folks who are not at the trade show but want to be at the trade show. And then you've got folks who aren't at the show and may not care or may just tangentially be scrolling, right? So there are a lot of different audiences. And it's important to identify which types of audiences from that list you want to hit. So if I'm myself and my number one goal at a show is to really drive value for a lot of partners or folks or companies in the industry who I'm prospecting from a sales perspective. My primary audience is going to be decision makers at the companies. So, as I'm creating content, everything's through that lens. So, how do I want to help empower them? How can I help serve them? Things like that. And from a goal standpoint, if you're a company, your goal might be brand recognition. It might be increasing market share in a vertical, things like that. There's a lot of different ways to achieve that. But and I'm seeing some of those questions come through as well. I'll get to them whenever we kind of find a break point here. But the next thing is assign roles for attendees. So a lot of companies will invest heavily in sending multiple people to a trade show. So whether that's your business development team, your marketing team, your product team, typically that will be a place where a number of different folks from different departments will be. So say I want to spend at least 4 or 5 hours creating video content from partner events, from show floor, things like that. I'll assign specific roles and even specific times for those folks to either roam the floor, go meet with prospects, go attend some of those pre-scheduled meetings. But it also can include things like, hey, this person can film all of the content on an iPhone, or it could be their personal iPhone, company-sponsored iPhone, or smart device. This person will be in charge of editing or submitting those in MarketScale Studio or wherever. And then that last person will be responsible for getting those downloaded and delivered. So there's a lot of different roles that you can have for those attendees. Typically, you'll see, so if I send 10 folks out to a show, typically I'll say 6 or 7 of those people are primary content creators and people using their phone, and I'll make sure they have microphones and lights if needed, things like that. And then the next kind of piece of advice that I have is to pre-schedule recordings and meetings when possible. So one of the things, if you've ever been to a trade show, that it can be really difficult to nail people down because people just want to go see what's happening. They want to go meet their colleagues. They have shows or speaking engagements that they're trying to attend while they're there. So the more that you can schedule ahead of time, the better. And I kind of shared an example of that over here. This is like a snippet of a quarter of kind of my individual plan for one of the trade shows I attended this year. You could see the booth number, the company, who's my contact name over there, who from our team's assigned to go interview them. And there's actually several more columns, things like time of visit, topic, things like that. But it was a little bit larger than the screen wanted it to be. So, but there's a lot of different ways to help plan that in advance, but pre-scheduling meetings is going to be your best weapon, especially from an actual staffing and planning perspective. Then the next step will be to kind of create a rough publishing calendar. So, when you have defined some of those objectives, audience goals, things like that, do you want to publish content that's geared more towards attendees during the show? That's a bit of a risk because you're competing with a lot of those eyeballs and a lot of different attention grabbing pieces. So maybe if you're creating content specifically geared towards folks who are already at the show, you want to create that publishing calendar to reflect that. So you might want to say, hey, we want to drip this out a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after the show to help spotlight our partners, to nurture our prospects. On the other end of the world, if you want to engage people who may not be at the show, but are very, very interested in what's happening, you want that publishing calendar to actually exist during the show time, because that's going to be the most active time where they're engaged. So people who are not at the show but want to be are most likely to engage while the show's happening in real time and not afterwards. So it depends on who your audience is, but once you've identified that, being able to create and build a guide for yourself is important. And then the last thing is pre and post show planning. So a lot of times people will focus on, okay, here's what I need to execute at the show. And then sure, we'll go figure out how we want to follow up with leads and deliver our content afterwards. But the pre-show and the post-show is as important as actually the execution of the show as well, especially from a planning and delivery standpoint. So I'll pause there. I saw a couple of folks asking some questions, so I'll dive through. Ian, Brandon, it looks like, have you seen people use a QR code at their booth to get more community-generated content? Yes, absolutely. So that goes into the pre-show planning side of things. So whenever you see folks with QR codes, normally that's built in advance and sent to a printer and delivered, and a lot of times travels with them at different shows. So you could actually, if we're talking about MarketScale Studio specifically here, you can go and create that open request and then generate a QR code from that open request, and you can now print that on whatever materials or handouts, and you could have that as a QR code that people can scan on. Ian responded, yeah, same thing. Would probably need to be staffed on and off to make sure that people are engaging with it. A lot of times people won't just walk up and scan a QR code, but if you prompt them to, they are likely to. And then I think, yeah, we'll go ahead and dig into the next one. I think that those are the questions from that one. So we'll spotlight kind of quickly here, what I'll call company focused content. So this is more branded content that is geared towards maybe building brand recognition, product recognition, maybe product announcements, spotlighting people in the company. This is very, very much about the internal communities or the internal products at a company. So a couple of key points here, going back to what I was talking about from an audience recognition standpoint. Recognize where your audience is consuming the content. Who is your audience? Is it people that are at the show? Is it people that are not at the show? Are you trying to teach people about a new product that came out? Because if I'm at the show, I don't need a video to teach me about a product because I can actually walk up and go touch it. But if I'm not at a show, that's a great way to show some hands-on training. And then I'll skip kind of the second one and come back to it in a second. But I talked about, product specifically and, new features and hardware and firmware updates. Show, don't tell. The more that you can actually show hands-on features and give people insight that they can't get anywhere else, the better. And which dives back into the second point. You've got to be able to provide unique insight. So I'm sure you've all seen these videos come through during product release season or at a trade show where it says, here's my cool new product, check it out. And it's like a fun 3D rendering, but it doesn't really tell you anything. It doesn't tell you what it does when it comes out, anything like that. The more that you can provide practical and usable insight into your product, your service, your company, the better. So a few different examples of that. Probably the most common thing you'll see outside of the product specific stuff is booth tours. So if I'm at a show and I'm walking around, and I'll show you an example of this here in just a second, and I'm walking around, I want to showcase all the different things happening. I want to showcase all my different demonstrations and talk about some of the trends that I'm seeing across all the different booths. And in this case, specifically one company booth. Second one, when you're thinking about sound bites and really digestible content, the people, products, and partners are kind of the trifecta that I think of. So the more that you can spotlight your people and help them tell their own stories or allow them to be subject matter experts on things, that'll be helpful for you. Second, products. Are you announcing a new product? Are you announcing a new feature? Are you talking about an upgrade? Showcase that. And then partners. So obviously throughout different industries, there are folks who partner with other manufacturers, other service providers. If you can actually go share that experience with them and get them on camera talking about maybe some of the things that they love about working with you, the better. So that's a really easy win. And then I'll kind of show this next example. And I'm just going to let it play through for a second so you can see it. I took the audio off of it, but you can kind of see the format of how this is done. So this was created 100% inside MarketScale Studio. One of our partners took some footage, uploaded it in studio and said, hey, we want to do a booth tour, but we want to make it a little bit more engaging than just product specific. So you'll see they do mention some specific products, and you'll see things like B-roll of this specific camera, but they're actually talking about industry trends and some of the ways that they have been able to partner with other manufacturers and remote production. Whether that's service providers, whether that's hardware manufacturers, you'll see some of that. So this is a good example of how somebody might create company-specific content at a trade show. So we'll kind of dive into the next one here. I didn't see any extra questions come through, so we'll jump into the thought leadership side of the content creation. I think it's really important to start off when you think about thought leadership, to use a sales term here. Thought leadership content typically skews a little bit more towards what's called the top of the funnel. So your information gathering, um, your kind of people who are curious about maybe your product offering, people who are searching for solutions, or maybe someone that you've talked to that's a really high level prospect, but you haven't really dug crazy deep into it. Thought leadership content is an incredible tool for that, which is why I said it's great for non-attendees. So even if people are incredibly interested in what's happening at the show, or if they're not, it's a great opportunity to engage with those people, because they typically, people who aren't at the show typically are a little bit less engaged with the day-to-day activities of a show. It's not always the case, but typically speaking, they are. So they're people who are a little bit more curious about the industry, want to learn a little bit more about trends, expectations, things like that. And also, thought leadership content is an incredible tool to gain industry trust. So, whether it's, you kind of see an image of me here interviewing a gentleman that is a good friend of mine, named Nick, where we're talking about industry trends, having conversations about what's next in the industry. It's an incredible tool to leverage, not only to build your own personal thought leadership, but also to leverage the voices of different folks across the spectrum of the community. So a few examples of types of content that you might see here in the thought leadership world is industry insights and trends. So it might be something like this, right, where I'm walking around asking people what they're seeing at the show. It might be a quick 90-second soundbite stand up from the booth where I'm saying, hey, here are the top 5 things I've seen on the show floor today. It might be me interviewing panelists or experts or influencers on the show floor. And then one thing that I always love to see is interviews and roundtables, because it allows people across different experiences and disciplines to provide their insight. So that's a really great way to use it. So the next example that I'll kind of show is from a thought leadership series I did at Infocom, which I'll dig into a little bit more here in a second, called Benfocom, where I just went around the show floor and kind of just had some fun. So you could see, I started off the video, I'm interviewing a hologram version of myself. But you'll see throughout the video, I'm stopping at different booths, asking questions, having some fun with it. Created all of this through Studio and an iPhone. So it was really easy to make. But, thought leadership, there's a lot more flexibility for fun and creativity, especially when you're trying to reach some new folks. So that I'm interviewing different people here, but I'll kind of dig in a little bit more to my specific experiences going to Infocom this year. So just for some context, I was able to and had the opportunity to host all of the organizers' live video content from the show floor. So you can see it's actually here on the top left corner. This was the live set that we had. So not only was I hosting that, I was speaking on panels and roundtables and things like that, but I was also going around creating thought leadership content in bites. So stuff like this right here, where I'm chatting with people at their booths, or even some pre-show content right here that you see where I'm chatting with people who had never attended the show before. So I had the opportunity really to create a ton of content around the show. And it was incredibly important, especially with all the different types of content, for me to focus narrowly on who my audience is, what are my goals, what is this piece of content going to deliver. So on this one, I want to focus a little bit more on the side where I leverage Studio. So the sound bites and the quick walk and talks, things like that. I showed you a picture of part of my schedule earlier, but once I had my goals of, hey, look, I'm really looking to meet new people, to spotlight new companies, to tell stories that haven't been told yet. And Ian, I'm going to pick on you here for a second. Ian, I think, turned around, it was like 75 videos in like 2 or 3 days. So shout out to you. But that was because we were well organized and well planned. So not only did we identify the people that we wanted to reach, we identified and built a plan for how we wanted to execute that. So I would go not only schedule the video, plan it, execute, and record. Then I would upload it to Studio and say, hey, Ian, I need you to take over from here. And he was monitoring things like continuity, fonts, consistency across video deliverables, audio quality, things like that, which was a little bit more challenging for me to do in the field. So that goes back to assigning those roles where there need to be obvious roles for people, whether it's myself who is going to acquire the interview, ask the questions, folks like Ian who came in and were able to execute and provide feedback. And then at the end, the delivery was back on me, right? So whenever that was all finished, it was all back on me. So we executed it actually very well, and it went almost perfectly according to plan. There were some scheduling flubs, which naturally will happen throughout the show. But we were able not only to create some incredible content and thought leadership content, but it gave us the flexibility to do things like booth tours and walk and talks. So content that was a little bit more auxiliary that you see kind of like up here on the top right, where I'm walking around spotlighting some of our partners and talking about some of the coolest things that I've been able to see because we had that structure that actually empowered some extra flexibility. So that's by no means comprehensive of how we covered the show, but it was, I think, a real masterclass in the best ways to kind of cover a show from a video standpoint. So wanted to take a second to kind of dig into, I know we're coming up on time here a little bit, but dig into some questions and answers. It looks like there have been some questions come through. So Katie, with a show, is there a way to group all the videos so that they are edited in the same style? The answer is yes. So this goes back to kind of what I was talking about with Ian. So we had a plan on the acquisition side, and then we had an actual intro and some frames built ahead of time. So we needed to make sure that not only was the music consistent, was the intro consistent, the fonts and styles consistent, but that the execution was consistent, because we were pulling from a ton of different editors across a ton of different time zones, skill sets, disciplines, things like that. So the best way that we kind of found to do it is to have kind of some pre-programmed text that you go through as you submit that in studio, whether it's, hey, here's the style, here's an example, send a link, here's the assets folder, and giving them all that kind of in one place. I know that that's a little bit overkill, but it really worked for us. And then expectation, please make it as close to this as possible. Here's everything you need. So that is probably the easiest way, is to either plan that in advance and have some of that pre-prescribed text, or kind of submit all those at one point in time too. And then Brandon, it looks like you asked the same question there in the Q&A, but let me see. I think that we got through most of the questions. But kind of just last thing here before we wrap up, going back to really the beginning, which, I was talking about the trade shows historically being the culmination of physical community. They can also be the culmination for the digital community, not only because there's so many people willing to talk and ask questions and showcase things, but naturally because of shows like Infocom or shows in my world like NAB, there are natural, what I call seasonalities to when people expect product announcements and releases and content to come out. And by leveraging those trade shows, you can not only leverage content creation, but you can maximize the expectation that the community has. So create content ahead of time, make sure that you're planning well to execute that, and then on the back end delivering that and making the most of your audience's expectations. So that I think kind of wraps it up. I don't know if anybody wanted to jump in and show anything else, but I appreciate you all coming in today. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a email, call me, text me, whatever. Just ben.thomas at marketscale.com. And then I could show you, I've got tons and tons of assets that wouldn't fit into a PowerPoint presentation and probably would bore you on all the specifics, but I'm more than happy to showcase some of those documents that we used if you wanted to use one for a client, partner, prospect, whoever. So appreciate you guys all jumping on, and let me know if you have any questions in the meantime.